Very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for your patience while we were getting started, even though there were some technical difficulties. Gratitude for all of your help and patience. So, as you know, the topic for today's webinar is a spiritual perspective on food and drinks. So throughout the webinar, please feel free to share your questions, your comments, and also your experiences. Then this will help us to make this webinar as interactive as possible. And also you can share where you're watching from. We're here streaming from Goa in India, but it's always nice to see worldwide where everyone's watching. And also I will try my best to answer as many of your questions as possible. In case there's anything that I'm not able to answer, then we do have a team of seekers that will be responding to your questions within 24 hours. Okay, so we can start now with the topic for today. So you all may be familiar with that saying that you are what you eat. Now this is also true in a spiritual sense. So not just the health effects of different foods impact us, but also there's a spiritual impact. So each food and drink that we have, they all have a certain level of spiritual purity in them. So when we eat food that is more spiritually pure, then we're able to imbibe the positivity or positive energy from it. And in turn, we feel more lighter, we feel healthier, we also feel more productive. Whereas on the other hand, you may have experienced when we eat food that is more spiritually negative, then we imbibe also those negative vibrations, and this can cause us to feel heavier, to feel lethargic, or even certain desires or negative thoughts can increase in the mind. So I'll just ask here if any of you have experienced that before with any different types of food or drinks. You can share in the comments and your experiences. And I'm just seeing we have some different seekers from Austria, from India joining us. So welcome to all of you. So SSRF, we've conducted a lot of research about the spiritual effects of different foods and drinks. And as we shared, that not just on the physical level, these food and drinks impact us, but also on a spiritual level. And this can impact our different subtle bodies, also the different spiritual energy centers or chakras that are there in the subtle bodies. And this in turn impacts all of our thoughts, our lifestyles, and our choices. So I just see here, I'm just checking what you're reading. So Petra is sharing that before starting spiritual practice, I had a liking for junk food, and now it completely changed. So very nice, Petra. We'll be sharing a little bit later also about how when we do spiritual practice, this spiritual purity or sattva component increases within us. So then naturally, the spiritually negative foods or drinks, we start to lose desires from them. So this is similar to what Petra is sharing here. Very nice, Petra. Okay, so the first question that I can ask, which may seem straightforward, is why is it that we eat food? So of course, naturally, food is motivated by our hunger. We may choose different food items based on our desires or different tastes. Those who are more health conscious, then maybe we pick certain foods to nourish our bodies. However, there can be some cases where due to social obligations or, we go out with friends if we're bored or to do something like that, we eat and drink for social obligations or to be with our friends and family. So for seekers who are on the path for God realization or self-realization, we may also eat due to these different reasons I shared, but also every choice that we make in our day-to-day lives, whether it's the food we eat, the type of clothes we wear, the colors we wear, which direction we sleep, all of these have an impact on us spiritually. So as a seeker, it's important for us to understand how these different day-to-day choices affect us on a spiritual level so that we can make conscious choices to align ourselves with more things that will benefit or complement our spiritual journey. So that's why we're having these different series on these webinars. I think we had a series on some like music and dance, and now food. So like that, we'll have some different topics in these series to help us become more educated about our choices. Okay. So some of you may have already experienced too that certain foods that we eat, if they're more on the spiritually negative side, then it can impact our spiritual practice also. I don't know if you've had any experiences when eating certain foods, maybe it becomes more difficult to chant or to meditate. You may get many thoughts, or you start to feel agitated or irritated, or even lethargic to do your sit-down chanting or meditation. So has this happened to any of you before? You can also write in the chat. So that's basically what we'll be talking about today, of what types of food and drinks can help us, and which types of food and drinks can cause obstacles in our spiritual practice. Okay. So I see more seekers are joining, so welcome to all of you. I see Yagain and Sally also there. So I'll just show one slide for one of the concepts for us to be familiar with. So one of the basic concepts we can be familiar with is about the three subtle basic components. So unknown to modern sciences, these are the three most basic subtle components that all animate and inanimate objects in the entire universe are made up of. So we have sattva, which represents purity and knowledge. We have raja, which represents action and passion. And we have tama, which represents ignorance and inertia. So likewise, the food and drinks that we eat that have more of the subtle component of sattva are more spiritually pure, whereas the foods that have more of the raja tama components, these would be considered more spiritually impure types of foods. Now, as a seeker of God, in our spiritual journey, one important concept to realize is that as we progress spiritually, we're actively trying to increase the sattva component, or the spiritually pure component within us and around us. And alongside with that, to reduce the tama component. So this is where it's important that any food or drinks that we take in, also if they're more spiritually pure, then this will help us in our spiritual journey. Okay, so now we'll start talking about the different beverages and food, which is I think all of us have been waiting for. I'm going to show you one table that you may or may not have seen before. It's quite interesting. Okay. So this is a table that is listing out some common beverages that we may be drinking on a day-to-day basis. And basically what this table is, it is comparing the different levels of sattva, raja, and tama in these common drinks, and also the effect of negative energies. So what this last column means is that depending on how high the raja tama component is in these different beverages, then accordingly there may be a higher influence or chance that negative energies can affect us through these drinks or cause obstacles in our spiritual practice by drinking it. So as you can see, it is in such a case if we drink beverages like alcohol or black tea, these are on the higher end of having the risk of negative energies affect us. And so the more quantity that we drink of these spiritually impure drinks, then we're more adversely affected to a greater extent. So if you have any questions about that table, you can also type it in the chat or in the comments here, and we can answer your questions. And we do have an article on our website that will show this table again, and you can read in more detail all the different footnotes and comments about it. So now we'll look at some of these different drinks that are there on the table. So the first one we're going to show is about fruit juice. So before I show you the picture of fruit juice, I just wanted to ask any of you if you want to share how you feel after you drink a fresh glass of fruit juice. Do you feel any spiritual changes? You can type in the chat. So what I'm showing you here, this is a subtle picture of fruit juice. So what a subtle picture is there are some seekers who have an activated sixth sense. They're able to see into the subtle dimension. Just as you and I see the physical dimension, they can also see the different positive or negative vibrations in the spiritual dimension. So this is a subtle picture of fruit juice. So you can see all the different positive energies that are attracted and emitted from the fruit juice. So fruit juice, it's basically Raja Sattva predominant, and therefore it's good for our health, and also spiritually, it's very good for us. It provides us vital energy, or pran shakti, so this gives us that energy, or that zest for action, and can reduce our lethargy. I know especially here in India, it's summertime now, so it's very hot and it's easy to feel lethargic, but just by drinking a glass of fruit juice, I start to feel energized again. And then also in terms of whether to have freshly squeezed fruit juice or bottled or canned, so even bottled fruit juice or canned fruit juice is still high in the sattva component. So either way, however which way you can get the juice, or what's convenient for you, both would be beneficial. So just seeing here if any comments or questions. So Petra is sharing, when taking sattvic foods, the desire to eat more than necessary is not showing up. The body and mind will be pleased with whatever is given then. However, when eating junk food, I never feel satisfied. But in the opposite, I want to eat more, even if I have eaten a lot of it. Yes. So this is a nice experience you shared, Petra, and very true. I think we've all experienced it at some point or the other. So some seekers are saying when they drink fruit juice, they also are feeling more energized, more calm. Petra is saying, Prana also is saying she feels calmness. Very nice. Okay, so we can show you the next drink. So the next beverage we'll talk about is a subtle picture of cow's milk. So cow's milk, as you can see, this is a subtle picture of milk from an Indian cow. So milk from an Indian cow is actually one of the most sattvic drinks. And milk from cows from other countries are actually 50% less sattvic than milk from an Indian cow. And there's two main reasons for this. One reason is that the breed of the cow, the Indian cow, is such that it's able to attract or imbibe the divine consciousness in the universe, whereas the other breeds, like the Jersey cow from US, for example, is of a different breed and doesn't have that ability. Also, the other factor is the treatment of cows. So as you may know, like in North America or US or these other places, the treatment of cows is not so good. They're actually poorly treated. There's also factory farms, which we'll speak about a little bit later. So due to the ill treatment of cows, also the sattvikta of spiritual purity goes down. However, in India, since cows are revered as holy animals and they're treated very well and with respect, then also the spiritual purity then increases in them. Okay, so if you have any questions about milk, the milk beverage from an Indian cow, you can also write in the comments and I see Petra sharing, there's nothing like milk from an Indian cow. It is such a difference that it does not even taste like milk. I was very surprised when drinking it for the first time. Very nice, Petra, for sharing. Okay, so those were two spiritually positive drinks that we wanted to show you the subtle pictures for. Now I can show you some different pictures. Actually, before I show the picture, the next drink we'll talk about is a cola drink, or like sodas, soft drinks. So before I show you the picture, I wanted to ask you all if you want to share how you feel when you're drinking like Coca-Cola or sodas or soft drinks like that. You can type in the chat if you felt anything different spiritually after drinking them. Okay, so this is the subtle picture of the popular cola drink. So maybe to your surprise that cola drinks are actually Rajatama predominant. So actually if we drink it regularly, it can be detrimental for our spiritual growth. So you can see these different vibrations. If you go to the article of cola on our website, then it will give the explanation of these different energies and arrows. But basically, in a nutshell, as you can see, a lot of negative vibrations are both emitted and attracted to the cola drink. The subtle tama component, or spiritually pure component, is very high in the cola drink. And if we drink these types of drinks often, then even the black energy can accumulate into black energy centers in the body. Due to the high tama component, then also this makes the body have lower pranshakti, or lower vital energy, and we can also experience more distress from negative energies. And one interesting point is you see this pink energy that's in like a ring around and coming out. So normally pink is a spiritually positive color, but in this case, in this drawing, this pink is showing some illusory or mayavi energy, and this is what makes the drink look attractive initially when we see it. But then actually after we drink it and feel the effects after time, we actually don't feel very good. So I don't know if any of you have also experienced anything like that. Okay. So one seeker is sharing, I never drank such drinks even before spiritual practice. I never did like the taste. So that's nice, Petra, that you shared. I also had the similar experience with one of the next drinks we'll talk about. But if you have any questions about what drinks we've shown so far, you can also write in the comments and we can answer. I'll show you the next picture. So the next beverage we wanted to talk about is about alcohol. So here's the subtle picture. So similarly, you can see that actually alcohol is able to attract a lot of black energy and also emanates this energy. So alcohol is actually Tama Raja predominant, and as a result, if we drink alcohol over time, then the sattvikta in us also starts to reduce, or the spiritual purity within us reduces. Alcohol can also attract negative energies, and when we drink this alcohol, then a black covering of black energy can form around us. Drinking alcohol can also increase our spiritual vulnerability, and you may have seen in either ourselves or in maybe those around us, when we drink alcohol, we are more likely to lose control over the mind and intellect. And actually negative energies can take advantage of this and in a way control us through this vulnerability that we have. So, and in terms of alcohol, even wine falls in the same category, even though it's common, like we may have heard that some doctors recommend drinking a glass of wine every day like that. But actually still even wine has these negative effects on a spiritual level. And so wine is just marginally less tamasic than liquor, such as whiskey or vodka, but still goes under the category of alcohol. So for those of us, if some of you may know someone who is trying to reduce also the consumption of alcohol, if they have some addiction, actually from our research, we found that 40% of the reason for addictions, whether it's to alcohol or to other substances, 40% is due to spiritual reasons. So actually on our website, we do have a section on how to overcome addictions through a 3-step program. And through that, there's some spiritual remedies and some chants that we recommend that help you to overcome the addiction with very less side effects or very less obstacles. And we have many case studies of seekers who are able to overcome such addictions also. So any questions about the beverages, you can type. Let me just see here. So Petra is asking, why did I have a liking for junk food but not for soft drinks? Is there a special reason behind? So it's a nice question, Petra. So our likes and dislikes are due to the different impressions in the subconscious mind. So some of you, we may or may not know that this birth itself may not be our first one. Actually, for many of us, we've had many lifetimes before our current one. So over time or over these lifetimes, we start to develop different likes and dislikes, or different likings for, say, this type of food or compared to this other type of food. So similarly, it can just be due to likes and dislikes. Okay. So we can continue now. So now we can talk more about food. So when we were looking at food, actually there's 2 main categories of food in terms of what is sattvic and what is not sattvic. So you can maybe guess what it is, but it's this common debate about vegetarian food versus non-vegetarian food. So actually it's becoming more and more common for more people to turn to becoming vegetarian or even vegan, and whether it's for our health, to improve our health, or maybe some people want to diet, others want to maybe help the environment, or others due to animal rights, they decide to be vegetarian. But some people, they don't consider actually the spiritual impact or the spiritual reasons why it can be more beneficial to take on a vegetarian diet. So this is what we'll talk about today. So I'll show you one table. So this is a table comparing, on average, if we took a cross-section of all non-vegetarian food or meat versus vegetarian food, we can see that vegetarian food has a more percentage of sattva, or the spiritually pure energy, whereas the non-vegetarian food, the tama component within it, is also more. So even though here it looks like just a difference of a few percentages, but actually even 1% makes quite a lot of difference. So I just wanted to ask maybe first, before we go into more detail, if any of you have noticed a difference, or if you've tried having a non-vegetarian diet and then switched over to a vegetarian diet, did you notice any changes or different feelings inside? So for me also, I grew up eating non-vegetarian food or meat, and then actually it was before spiritual practice that I changed to a vegetarian diet. I'll share a little bit later about that. But I wanted to hear maybe from all of you if you had any experiences to share. Okay, I'm just checking for any questions. So now, as you noticed in the table I showed you, that for the non-vegetarian food, there was actually more of the tama component. And the reason for that is due to the animal that is killed for the consumption of meat. At that time, they experience a lot of pain. They also can feel anger towards the people that are killing them. And then due to that, all of those negative vibrations of the animal's thoughts and emotions, this actually goes into the meat itself. So that's why the tama component is more in non-vegetarian food. And we'll speak about this a bit more also. So I just see that Petra is sharing that she noticed that laziness was increasing when eating non-vegetarian food. Yes. So let me just show you a subtle picture of non-vegetarian food versus vegetarian food. So you can see. Okay, so you can see this is a subtle picture of meat. So these are the different vibrations that are emitted and attracted to the meat. And then you can also see, again, similar like the cola drink or the alcohol drink, there's this pink spiral, or this energy you see. So this is again that illusory energy, or Mayavi energy, that makes that food item look desirable at first, or it looks attractive. But actually behind what it is the negative vibrations, or the high tama component in it. Now compare to a picture of fruit. So this banana, which is representing vegetarian food. You can see the completely opposite types of energies. There's this attraction and flow of divine consciousness in it that's emitted. Also, this divine energy or Shakti is also activated in the food. So that's on a spiritual level. From a subtle standpoint, you can see the different energies in the food. So I see Pratap is sharing that very disturbing about non-veg. Yes. Do you mean the energies that you saw? Yes. Yes, Pratap, like the energy, you can see it's very disorienting, like that. So that's actually the type of energy we're consuming at the time when we eat meat. So now I'll talk a bit more to explain like why it is that those types of vibrations are in the meat or the non-vegetarian food. So one of the reasons is like when we go to the grocery store nowadays, and we go to the deli section, then very often that meat that we're buying there are from animals from factory farms. So those of you may be aware of what factory farms are, but basically it's like an industrialized system or a way to keep the animals, whether they're cows, chickens, or whatever animal it may be. And in those factory farms, the animals are very poorly treated. They're often abused and killed in very disturbing ways, or very ways that inflict a lot of pain on the animal. So this was actually a turning point for me. As I shared, I was 16 when I decided to go towards a more vegetarian diet, and it was due to seeing a video online about how animals are treated in these factory farms. And coming from Canada or North America, then it was very likely that any food I was buying there, like the meat I was buying there, were from these factory farms. So I was so taken aback by how the animals were treated that I didn't feel that I wanted to support this type of treatment of animals, and that it wasn't right. So I remember that night itself, like I lived with my family and my grandparents, and I just had rice and broccoli basically that evening when I started to change my diet. So I don't know if any of you have maybe felt similar. You can also share in the comments. But basically, as I saw in the video, and as you may have also seen yourself, the animals in these factory farms, they experience a lot of fear, a lot of pain, and even a lot of anger towards the people that are mistreating them. So that's why all of those vibrations and those emotions are transferred into the meat itself. So when the animal is killed, then all of that stays with the meat. Even when it's packaged and then goes to the grocery store, then we buy it and we cook it. So all of those vibrations are still present, and that is what we're consuming inside. And that's why the tama component is more in that case. So another experience I wanted to share with you all, that like although I read these articles on SSRF and saw these videos, it was in 2010 that my sisters and we went on a bicycling tour, and we got to visit like different farms around our area. So it was different farms, different orchards, and you can buy their like organic and local produce there. And then there was one farm that we stopped at, and it just looked like a big barn, and there were animals inside. So we thought we'd go in and see what was inside. And in there were different animals, like there were rabbits, chickens, and different birds and all of that. But then the moment that my sisters and I stepped in, we felt like a very different energy. Like I started to feel actually quite anxious, like anxiety, some fear, and I didn't feel good. And I felt that it wasn't my fear, but I was looking at the animals, and I saw that actually like they were moving very erratically, with a lot of like anxiety. And slowly we came to realize that actually that barn was where people were coming to like the people there would kill the animal like there on the spot, and then give the fresh meat to the people right then and there. So when we realized that, then this like all of the articles from SSRF, these videos, it all came together, because like that anxiety or fear of the animals, it was so tangible that I could experience, and it really made me realize that all of this energy is in the animal at the time of death, and this is what so many people around the world are eating and experiencing that. Just wanted to share that experience, and just seeing if any comments are there. So Layla is asking what kinds of foods we eat in the ashram. So I'll share this a little later, Layla. It's a nice question that you asked. And Petra is sharing, I also made the same decision in that age for the same reason, and was vegetarian for 5 years. This changed all of a sudden within one day when I was 23. I cannot understand the reason for it. Yes, Petra. So, not to worry, there can be different factors or reasons why sometimes it may change like that. But I think now you're eating a more vegetarian diet. If you can correct me, but there can be different factors that our diet may change or our preference may change over time, and that's okay also. Okay, so now we just talked about the treatment of animals, and another point we were speaking about is that the more foods and drinks that we eat that are spiritually impure, meaning if they have the tama component in them, then this tama component can accumulate in our bodies, and it can actually last for some time. So I have one slide to illustrate that. Okay. So when we eat either food or drinks that are high in this tama component, then it takes time for that tama component to reduce in the body. And the only way for it to really reduce is by doing spiritual practice as per the 6 basic principles. So this picture here is just showing like 3 examples. So you see in the first example, this is a person who's doing spiritual practice who gives up meat all at once. So then when they give up meat all at once, then it would take about 5 years for that tama component in them to reduce or to get nullified. In the second example, let's say there's a person doing spiritual practice and they give up meat slowly. Then it would take about 10 years for the tama component to be nullified. Then if there's a person who's of an average spiritual level, who's not doing spiritual practice, and gives up meat all at once. So even though they give up meat all at once, it still would take 30 years for the tama component in them to be nullified. So I'll just take some water. So I don't know if this table surprises any of you, or if you have any questions about it. But mainly when we do spiritual practice, as per the 6 basic principles, then we're actively changing the tama component within us and changing it to sattva, or the spiritually pure component. So that's why doing spiritual practice helps to nullify any tama component within us much faster. So another point that we can keep in mind is when that tama component is high within us, then there can be different effects on a physical, psychological, and also spiritual level. So on a physical level, I think some of you shared, like Petra shared with junk food, she feels more lethargic or more tired. It can also increase the likelihood of having different diseases. If the tama component in us is high, we can attract or develop different health problems. Then on a psychological level, we can have an increase in thoughts related to desires or different spiritually impure thoughts, like sexual thoughts, greed and anger can increase within us. Then also on a spiritual level, we can become more vulnerable to attacks from negative energies when we ingest a lot of food or drinks that have the high tama component in them. Okay, so any questions about that, you can also type in the chat. So let me see. So Yagain is asking, is factory-made foods as tamasic as meats? So if you can share, Yagain, what types of foods you mean, like food that is made or packaged in factories? So in this case, what we were talking about in factory farms, due to the ill treatment of animals because they're abused and not treated well, then this is why the tama component increases in that way. And Peter is asking, what about eating fish? Is this comparable to eating other meats? Now this is a good question. So in terms of the tama component, then red and white meats would be higher in the tama component. Fish is marginally less. It's still considered meat, and the tama component is still high in fish. But compared to red meat or white meat, then fish is marginally less. And Yagain is asking, sometimes I really like to eat an ice cream, but I think it's tamasic because of the white sugar or pasteurized milk. Is it true? Okay. So for ice cream, like since ice cream has milk in it, then it can be sattvic. But also on the other hand, when there's a lot of additives, or if it's high in, say, like some food coloring, dyes, like that, or chemicals, then this is what can increase the spiritual impurity in any food that we eat, not just ice cream, but any food. So that way we can see that in the types of foods that we choose also. So similarly for the colas, or the sodas, this is also one reason why the tama component is high, due to all of the additives and the chemicals that are present in the drink or in that food. Okay. Now, the next slide I wanted to show you is about like the vegetarian or non-vegetarian diet and what impact it has on our spiritual growth. Because most of us that are watching, I think all of us have an inclination towards spirituality, or many of us may be already doing some form of spiritual practice. So this is actually a very important slide for seekers. Let me just pull it up. Okay. So this picture is giving an example. So let's say this person, Matthew, let's say he's starting his spiritual practice at the 30% spiritual level. And he's doing 4 to 5 hours of spiritual practice on a daily basis. So if all factors are equal, if he were to choose to become vegetarian, then he would reach the spiritual level of 40%, 20 years faster than if he consumed a non-vegetarian diet. So there's 2 reasons for this. One second. So there's 2 reasons for this. So as we were sharing before about the Tama component, so when the Tama component is high in us, then it makes it more difficult for us to progress spiritually or to do spiritual practice. And the second factor is also that when we eat meat or non-vegetarian food, then we also can accumulate negative karma or demerits. So some of you may be aware of the law of karma. So basically, for any good deeds or good actions that we do, we receive merits. And this comes back to us in the form of some happiness. However, if we do some bad deed, then we can accrue negative karma. And this will return back to us in some form of unhappiness. So similarly, when we eat non-vegetarian food or we eat meat, because it involves the killing of an animal or the suffering of another, like something that's been created by God, so this animal, then also we can accrue that negative karma. So when an animal is killed for the purpose of consumption, then 50% of the negative karma will go towards, say, the butchers or the people that worked in that factory farm that were involved in killing the animal. And then the other 50% actually goes on the consumer, so the person who buys the food and then eats it. So when we're doing spiritual practice, then in order to progress spiritually, we need to go or overcome our destiny or our karma. So when we eat non-vegetarian food or when we eat meat, then the energy from our spiritual practice goes first towards nullifying our karma. So that demerits or negative karma that we've gained by eating the meat, our spiritual energy will go towards nullifying that karma first before we grow spiritually. So that's why in that picture we showed, the person eating meat or non-vegetarian, they still progress spiritually by doing spiritual practice, but it takes them longer. So this is one of the main factors. So if you have any questions about that, you can also ask in the comments. So Petra is sharing that the table makes it very clear. Yes, I also felt the same. Saurav is asking about eggs. So eggs also, they fall under the category of non-veg or also meat, since they come from the chicken or they come from the animal. And very often too, these eggs are collected or produced through factory farms. So those same principles about how the animal is ill-treated and is abused like that in the factory farm, all of this goes into the eggs also. So I just wanted to share for many of us, and myself included, like I grew up eating non-vegetarian food or eating meat. So it may be difficult for some of us because we're so used to it. If we're wanting to reduce the intake of meat or non-vegetarian food, it can take some time. And that's okay also. We generally recommend seekers that you can see gradually how to reduce the intake of non-vegetarian food if that's what you wish to do for your spiritual practice. So you can see, like maybe in a week, and you're used to eating meat 7 days a week. Then slowly you can see, maybe I can reduce it to 6 days a week that I eat meat, and 1 day I eat vegetarian. Then slowly you can go on reducing step by step, then 5 days a week, 4 days a week. And then eventually also, as you continue your spiritual practice, even the desire to eat the non-vegetarian food starts to reduce. Like I can share in my example also. Initially I stopped eating red and white meat, but my family was concerned and they wanted me to still eat fish, to still eat eggs. So I agreed. And even up till 2 years ago, I was still eating fish and still eating eggs. But then slowly over time, what I found was the pleasure or happiness I had from eating fish. I come from British Columbia, so those of you may know like the wild BC salmon that I enjoyed to eat before. But what I started finding was as I would eat the salmon, the happiness that I got from eating the fish versus the after effects was not worth it. After eating the salmon, although I enjoyed it at that time, I would start feeling heaviness after eating it. And then even like up to 2 days after eating the fish, I would notice that it was more difficult for me to chant. I was feeling more lethargic or feeling unenthusiastic. Like I would have to really push myself to make efforts in my spiritual practice. So then I started feeling like the pros and cons was not balanced. And even slowly the happiness or the desire to eat fish or to eat eggs started reducing on its own, to the point where now I'm as happy eating vegetarian food now that I don't even desire having that non-veg food. I don't know if some of you may have experienced that before in doing spiritual practice, your desires for maybe the less positive food to be reducing. You can also share in the comments. So Layla is saying she has become vegan now too, and it took time. So it's nice, Layla, that you could share. And Prana is saying she didn't know before the connection to the law of karma and diet. Yes. Yeah, it was new for me also to learn through SSRF. Layla is sharing that eggs make her feel very heavy and she can't digest milk anymore. Yes. Sometimes that can also happen, with different foods. Even I noticed that, usually when I was here in India, I wasn't eating eggs. And then when I went to visit Canada, if I had an omelette or something, my stomach would not be able to handle it. So some part was some physical reason, but then the other part was also because the tama component was there in the eggs. Even my body was not reacting to it very well. So that's some experiences you may have over time. Okay. So we have a few other points we want to share with you about food. So one is about having prayers, making prayers or chanting before having meals. So the intention behind any action or activity we do is very important. So similar when we're eating food. There's one saint of our organization who reminded seekers, and he said, if you eat for the taste or to fill your stomach, then that is what you will get, mere matter for your body. But if you eat to gain divine consciousness from the food, then it's divine consciousness that you will get. So this was a very nice quote that also stuck with me. So if you remember that picture of the banana or those spiritually positive drinks like fruit juice and milk, you can see that there's a lot of divine consciousness in these foods. So the way that we can be able to activate or imbibe that divine consciousness or spiritual purity is through praying before eating meals. So I don't know if any of you have tried this before. If you've tried praying before meals or chanting while eating, if you notice any difference, you can also write in the chat. I'll show you one picture. So this is a subtle picture of what happens when we pray before eating and then when we start eating the food. So you can see that due to praying before having meals, then the spiritual emotion or bhav is awakened in the person, and due to being in communion with God, then this attracts that divine consciousness both towards the food and also the person who's eating the food. You can see also this red outline around the person. So this is Shakti. So this divine energy is activated in the food and also reaches the person's subtle body, and it creates a protective sheath around us. And also our vital energy or pran shakti increases when we pray before eating. So have any of you experienced any spiritual benefits of praying or chanting before eating? You can write in the chat. So basically, the prayers that we make can be just a simple prayer. Something like, Dear God, please let the food consumed by me be with the spiritual emotion that it's your holy sacrament. Please let me gain divine energy and divine consciousness through the food. Or we can also pray, like, Dear God, if there's any black energy in the food, please destroy it and infuse it with divine consciousness. So like that, in your own words also you can pray. I often also pray gratitude, like gratitude to God for providing this food. Praying also to like the God principle in the sun or the earth or the water that also produced the food. Then this also can generate that spiritual emotion and also benefit the food that we eat positively. So Petra is sharing. Lately, I completely lost self-awareness while eating when having prayed before. Then I experienced very strong spiritual emotion. It was the very first time that I really enjoyed eating. Very nice, Petra. Okay. And we can also try chanting while eating. So as SSRF, we recommend chanting the name of God as per the religion of your birth. Or if you're not connected to any religion, we do have a universal chant also. But also when we chant God's name, we're attracting and imbibing God's energy, or this spiritual pure energy. So similarly, when we eat while chanting, then that positivity also is attracted to us and to the food, and then we are able to imbibe that positive energy. And another point that we wanted to share is that the cook or the person making the food also matters. So basically, when we cook our food, along with chanting the name of God, with prayers and remembering God, then also those divine positive energy goes into the food. Now this is compared to, let's say, if we go to a restaurant and we eat food. We don't know who is cooking the food or preparing the food, but if that person, say, has a lot of personality defects like anger, pride, attachment, envy, like that, or even if the person is affected by negative energies, then similarly those negative vibrations can be attracted to the food. So this is also important for us to realize. So I don't know if any of you have experienced the difference from eating home-cooked food versus eating food at a restaurant or eating outside. So you can also share in the chat what you might have felt. And of course it's natural, like even us sometimes we like to go to a restaurant and to have a meal. So we can just keep in mind this spiritual principle and see what measures we can take. So what we shared before, we can pray also before eating food from the restaurant, that if any negative energy or black energy is there in the food, for it to be destroyed, for the food to be protected, and let me imbibe the positivity from the food. We can also use holy ash. So on our website, in the spiritual healing section, you'll see some different remedies, like how to make holy water or holy ash. So that we can just take a small pinch and we can also sprinkle that over the food. And this will also help to nullify the negative effects of those foods. Okay, so I see some seekers are sharing. So Pratap is sharing that after praying, spiritual emotion is so alive while eating. Very nice, Pratap. And Layla is sharing that never argue when cooking food because it affects it. It does affect it, yes. And she also experienced that she feels more sattva, or spiritual purity, when eating home-cooked food. Yes, very true. So this is why SSRF, we do recommend trying to eat as much home-cooked food as possible for these different reasons. And but also in case we do eat outside or take restaurant food, then at least these different spiritual measures we can take to protect ourselves. And I think one of the viewers was also asking about the ashram food. So in the SSRF Research Center in ashram, only vegetarian food is served, and also it's very simple food. It's mostly consisting of beans, rice, lentils, like that. But actually it's the attitude in which the seekers who are making the food, so this is part of their spiritual practice or service, satseva, to cook this food. And in the ashram there's over 500 seekers, so even the quantity of food that is made is very large. But since the ashram seekers, while they're cooking the food, they're praying, they're chanting, they're thinking of God while making the food, then also the spiritual positivity or purity is also imbibed in the food. So I always notice such a big difference when I come from Canada and then I go to the ashram and eat that food. Then I feel so much more lighter. I actually feel enthusiastic after for spiritual practice, for chanting. I feel more energized after eating that food. Whereas when I'm in Canada, then similarly when I go to the restaurant with my family and friends, then I feel that heaviness or more difficulty to chant, like that. So similarly, it's not that we have to be in the ashram to be able to spiritually benefit from the food, but we can see what is our attitude when we're cooking, when we're preparing the food, when we're eating the food. And then likewise, we can also experience these spiritual benefits. I can share one example. In Europe, in Croatia, they were holding one spiritual workshop for 5 days, or actually 3 days, and they were deciding whether they should order food from restaurants to bring for the attendees, or whether they should allocate seekers to cook the food as their satseva or service. So they went with the second option. They got seekers themselves were cooking the food for the attendees. So after eating the food, the attendees were saying wow, this food tastes so amazing, it's so good. From what restaurant did you buy it from? Then when they found out that actually it was seekers who made it, then they actually realized that, this is even better than restaurant food, and they could actually feel the love and care and that spiritual purity that was within the food, because the seekers made it as their satseva or their service. So like that, similarly, wherever we are, it's the attitude or the intention behind when we're cooking food, eating food, that will allow us to spiritually benefit from any activity. So I hope that helps share some points. So I see some questions and comments. So Layla is sharing fresh juice. Fresh made juices make me have more energy too. Yes, very nice. And Peter is saying the water we drink is very much affected by the energy around it as well. Yes, this is an interesting point that Peter shared. So in terms of water, water is basically spiritually neutral, but it can imbibe both negative and or positive energies. So similarly, if the environment is more spiritually impure, then those vibrations can be imbibed in the water. But we do have an article on the site of how to make holy water, or how to charge water by chanting. There's one where you put your hand over the top of the glass and you chant the name of God, and this can actually spiritually purify or put more positive vibrations in the water. Okay. So Vesna is saying that thank you, this helps. Very nice. Petra is sharing she had the same experience with ashram food, and she tries to hold on to this experience in mind when cooking at home. Very nice, Petra. And Layla is saying, I hope one day I can visit the ashram. Yes, Layla, and to all of you watching also, if you may have heard, we'll talk about later, we have workshops also held at the SSRF Ashram and Research Center where you can also come and visit. Okay, so we're actually coming towards the end of our webinar, but it was very nice to hear all of your experiences and to answer all the different questions that you had. Just see if anything is here. So in case there was any questions that I missed during the webinar, we will have our speakers after the webinar answering your questions within 24 hours. And if you liked the webinar today, you can also please feel free to share or like the video with your friends and family. We'll also be uploading the video on YouTube later, so you can also share it on YouTube. And you can write to us in the private messages if you have any further questions or need any other guidance about your decisions in spiritual practice. And I'll just share a few closing slides. So SSRF, we also have online satsangs or spiritual meetings where you can learn more about spiritual practice and these different topics we've been talking about in our webinars. And some of you were asking about wanting to visit the ashram. So we do have these 5-day spiritual workshops that are held in Goa. Actually, our one in May is starting in 2 days. So some seekers from Hawaii, from Croatia and Germany have started coming to the ashram since yesterday and today. So you can read more about it on our website, spiritual.university. And then also in case, let's say maybe India is too far to travel, but you still want to attend a workshop, we do also have 3-day workshops held in Europe and USA. I think the one in USA also just started on Friday, yesterday, in New Jersey. So lastly, in case you want to subscribe or get notified of our future webinars, you can also like our page and click following and then click on the suggested live videos. And you'll also get a notification when we go live. Okay. So on behalf of our SSRF Seeker family, we want to express gratitude for all of you joining us today. And we wish you all the best in your spiritual journey. So much gratitude for coming. And namaskar.